Hello fellow modelers, welcome back to the channel, and today we're diving into the assembly of the Academy 1/35th scale M3 Stuart Honey. Alright, let's start things off with a test fit of the upper hull to the lower hull, making sure everything sits right before we move forward. Once that's done, we'll get into some of the storage modifications the British added to their Stuarts. Specifically how they carried their extra gear and fuel. The British added extra storage for ammunition. More racks and boxes were added to carry additional 37mm rounds and machine gun belts. Speaking of fuel, I'm cleaning up the attachment points on the supplemental fuel containers, what the British called flimsies. Given the desert conditions, additional jerry cans and water containers were mounted externally, a necessity for both crew and engine cooling. These were their version of jerry cans used to extend the tank's operational range. I'm attaching them to the tray now, and once they're all in place, I'll come back and add the handles. You could paint these separately and attach them later, but I prefer to get them all on at once. Like I've said before, this is a straightforward build, no fancy tricks, just building it straight out of the box. Next up, we've got the 37mm main gun. As usual, there's some cleanup to do, removing the attachment points and smoothing out any mold lines. I start out with medium sanding paper and work my way to finer grits to get a nice clean barrel. Once that's prepped, I'll move on to assembling the cradle parts and pivoting mechanisms, which of course also need some cleanup. The 37mm M6 gun mounted on the Stuart Honey tank was standard for American light tanks of the period and was considered adequate at the beginning of the North African campaign. However, in actual combat against German Panzer III and IV tanks, its performance was quickly seen as inadequate. Robert Crisp's Brazen Chariots provides first-hand accounts of the 37mm limitations. In one engagement, the author describes the ineffectiveness of the gun against enemy tanks at range, noting that its shells bounced off enemy armor more often than not. The Stuart's gun could damage German light vehicles and soft-skinned targets, but when facing the heavier Mark III and IV Panzers, British tankers had to rely on flanking shots or targeting the tracks and vision slits to have any effect. In one instance, Crisp ordered his gunner to engage an enemy field gun. The 37mm rapid firing capability allowed for quick responses, and the gun knocked out the enemy before they could return fire. However, this was against unarmored targets. When engaging German armored units, the Stuart had to rely on its speed and maneuverability rather than gun power. A crucial moment in the book highlights the psychological impact of the Stuart's cannon rather than its penetration power. Crisp describes an engagement where a German Mark IV was flanked by a fellow Stuart commander. The 37mm gun was fired at the rear of the Panzer, causing the German crew to panic and bail out, despite the likelihood that the shells didn't fully penetrate the armor. Overall, the 37mm gun was fast-firing and effective against infantry, soft vehicles, and lightly armored tanks, but against thicker German armor, it was woefully underpowered. British tank crews adapted by using mobility, outflanking tactics, and ambushes rather than relying on sheer firepower. Once everything's glued in place and set, I'll come back to tidy up any seams that need extra attention. The plastic in this Academy kit is excellent, no issues with it being too soft or too brittle. As Goldilocks would say, it's just right.
She sat in the wee little chair. It was just right until...
The gun breech block fits together tightly, and while the parts are a bit simplified, they look the part. I should have put that one on first. Moving inside, I'm adding the turret seats. These attach to railings that allow them to move up and down. In real life, but not here. First, I install the seat supports, then the round seat pads themselves. The interior of this kit is pretty simplified, but it does the job. So I'll just mention, even though Academy gives us this interior, it might not be really correct for the British Honey. When the British first received the M3 Stuart, nicknamed the Honey, in mid-1941, they found it to be a fast, reliable light tank, well suited for desert warfare. The first 84 tanks arrived in July 1941, and by November of that year, 170 were in action during Operation Crusader. The Stuart remained in use throughout the North African campaign, which lasted until May 1943. However, as the war progressed, its 37mm M6 gun became increasingly ineffective against newer German tanks, leading to its gradual shift to reconnaissance and support roles. One major design feature missing from early British Stuarts was the turret basket. Unlike later American models, these early versions required crew members to stand on the hull floor, making turret operation more cumbersome. The M3A1 Stuart, introduced in 1942, was the first to feature a turret basket, which rotated with the turret, improving crew efficiency. However, by the time this modification appeared, the limitations of the Stuart's firepower and armor had already become evident, and British forces were moving toward heavier tanks. During the critical battles of Operation Crusader 1941 and Gazala 1942, the vast majority of British Stuart Honeys lacked turret baskets, confirming that they were not a feature of the Honey during its primary service in North Africa. Though later models with the turret baskets may have arrived toward the end of the campaign, they were not standard in major engagements. Thus, the British M3 Stuart Honey tanks in desert warfare, July 1941 to May 1943, did not have turret baskets. The addition came with later American models, but by then the Stuart had been largely outclassed and was gradually phased out of frontline service. Now we're on to the turret itself. On the top, it has that distinct six-sided shape with the top hatch as well. At first I glued this part on upside down, being unfamiliar with the honey. I didn't catch it right away, but I quickly corrected it when I found my error. In hindsight, I probably should have left this part off until after painting, as it made masking a little trickier. On the exterior, I'm assembling the side-mounted machine gun and its mounting bracket. A bit of cleanup was needed before everything fit together properly. The turret-mounted external .30 caliber Browning machine gun on the M3 Stuart Honey played a crucial role in desert warfare, offering an additional firepower option for anti-infantry and anti-aircraft use. Unlike the coaxial machine gun, which was fixed alongside the main 37mm gun, this externally mounted Browning sat on a pintle mount atop the turret, allowing the commander or the loader to operate it while exposed. British Stuart tanks relied on this weapon for suppressive fire against enemy infantry, light vehicles, and machine gun nests. In Brazen Chariots, Robert Crisp emphasizes the importance of the Browning, describing how crews checked and maintained it before battle to ensure reliability. However, he also highlights its vulnerability, since the operator had to be exposed to fire the gun. It was risky to use in direct combat. Despite its limited armor penetration, the Browning was highly effective for keeping enemy anti-tank crews pinned down, clearing the way for advances. Crews also attempted to use it against low-flying aircraft. Though its effectiveness in that role was limited. Some tankers removed the external MG entirely to reduce weight, while others adjusted the mount to better suitability during rapid maneuvers. In summary, the external .30 caliber Browning on the Stuart Honey was a versatile but exposed weapon, critical for infantry suppression, but requiring caution due to the operator's lack of protection. It remained a standard feature on Stuarts throughout the North African campaign, though later tank designs would shift toward fully enclosed firepower solutions. At this point, I also took care of the vision ports on the turret. The British M3 Stuart Honey tanks were equipped with turret vision ports similar to those on the standard American M3 models. The M3 Stuart's turret featured 3 pistol ports, which could be used as vision openings or for firing personal weapons. Jumping back to those fuel tins, I'm adding their handles now. Usually I prefer attaching handles and hand grips before fully cleaning them up, and I'll come back later once they've set up in place and clean up any attachment points or any other issues. The front hall footstep on the M3 Stuart Honey was a small but essential design feature, assisting crew entry and exit in both training and combat conditions. Given the high front glacis plate and the compact layout of the Stuart, the step provided a crucial foothold for the driver and co-driver, allowing them to climb into their positions more easily. I actually like to clean up my grab handles after they've been glued into position and then allowed to cure and harden. I find it's a lot easier, since they're so small, to do it once they're in place. Then I moved on to the antenna mount for the radio. Returning to the turret interior, I added the soft seat pads. Meanwhile, I started assembling the ammo boxes. This one is different from the others. It's designed for the external machine gun. Again, some seam cleanup was needed before mounting it to its pivot. Fortunately, the kit's fit is solid overall, making assembly a smooth process.
I'm not exactly sure how this is supposed to go together, but I think what I'm going to do is just glue this part together and let it set up. So this is going to be a real trial of patience putting these together. So a system that I've come up with is maybe to do 2 pads, glue those together, let it set up, and then come back after.
And now we get into the tracks.
Yeah, this is the difficult part. So maybe just do one at a time. Just a little titch of glue. Yeah, maybe do that first. I think that might be the way to go. Just do one on each side. Actually, that doesn't work. You gotta have the second one in there. All right, so that's what you do. You do it like this. You take one, and then you do the other.
At first, I tried holding and assembling 2 links at a time, but that proved impractical. Instead, I switched to a piece of double-sided tape mounted on an MDF board, which let me lay out the track pads and align the end connectors more easily. The trick with track assembly is getting just the right amount of glue, enough to hold things together, but not so much that you lose flexibility. I prefer assembling tracks in sections, starting with the lower rung, then working up, so I can adjust the fit as needed. Some builders prefer to assemble the whole track and mount it afterwards. I find my method in this example gives me more control. Here's a story from Brazen Chariots by Robert Crisp about the Stuart Honey tank tracks. When the British first received the American M3 Stuart tanks, they were immediately impressed by 2 features: the powerful radial engine, originally designed for aircraft, and the tracks. Unlike previous British tanks, which frequently suffered from track failures in rough terrain, the Stuart's tracks were revolutionary. Each track link was mounted in solid rubber blocks, which significantly reduced wear and tear and allowed for a much smoother ride. During their initial trials in Egypt, British crews tested the Stuart's handling in the open desert. One of the commanders, eager to see how the tracks held up under stress, ordered the driver to try and break them. The driver, Whaley, pushed the tank hard, executing sharp turns and aggressive maneuvers. The crew braced for the familiar bang clatter that signaled a thrown track, but it never came. The Stuart performed flawlessly, unlike British tanks of the time, which often suffered catastrophic track failures. It was so reliable and smooth to handle that Whaley, influenced by American technicians present, grinned and declared, "It's a Honey, sir." From that moment, the Stuart became universally known as the Honey among British crews. However, the rubber track pads that made the Stuart so smooth also had a downslide. Later, during an 80-mile nighttime march over rough limestone terrain in the western desert, the brigade discovered, to their horror, that the rubber blocks on nearly every Stuart tracks had been chewed to bits. This unexpected failure nearly crippled the brigade. The issue was reported immediately to General Arkenlich, who ordered all Stuart tracks in the rear areas to be stripped and rushed forward by rail. Within 3 days, the tracks were replaced and the brigade was back in fighting shape. The Stuart's tracks were a game changer for mobility in the desert, but this episode highlighted the challenges of adapting foreign technology to the brutal conditions of North Africa.
I think I need to expose a little bit more of this double-sided tape. I've been working with it for a while and it's not so sticky anymore. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm actually building 2 of these grants from Academy. And I've already done the one. Damn it. I did it upside down again.
Shoot. Yeah, it's not working.
Once I had the links joined and everything in place, I used an elastic band to hold it all tight and gauge whether I needed to add more or remove links. Elastic bands can be a great tool in modeling, though, as you can see, they don't always cooperate. The physics of it all can be a bit frustrating at times, but with a little patience, it all comes together.
Why is that happening? Damn it. Alright. It worked on the other one.
And that's where we're at so far. Next up, we'll keep refining the details and getting everything ready for paint.
So I painted this copper while it was together, and I should have actually painted these separate. I wanted to build everything to show you guys what it looks like when everything's built up. But normally what I would do, paint the copper, paint these parts white, and then glue everything together after. And to get that inner dimension, I've used my awesome measuring tool here. I've gone on the inside here with this, and then I transfer it to the tape, and I can cut myself some nice proper sized tape. All right, I'm gonna paint these ammo containers on the white edges that got painted copper. This is how I clean my airbrush. I've got some lacquer thinner in here. I take my brush, a little shitty brush, I clean all the cup out, and then I just shoot it out. And there you go. It's clean. I don't know what the big issue is about cleaning airbrushes. Unfortunately, I broke these off, but not. Ah!
And that's another step forward on the British Stuart honey build. Plenty more details come as we keep refining this little desert runner. Hope y'all enjoyed the progress so far. Lots more to do, but that's all part of the fun. In the meantime and in between time, that's another edition of Jet Scale Models. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Okay, there's no real place to put this, so according to the instructions, it's somewhere in the middle. So that's what I'm gonna do.